So what is going to make a student successful, at college? This is one of the big questions that we're talking about today. How do we define success in these different areas? Students should really utilize fully all the services and supports that they need, right? So support services, other programs, absolutely working with any of their instructors, communicating with them, providing a letter of accommodation, just talking with their instructors on a regular basis. I know that's difficult for some students, but it really pays off. A lot of places have their own tutoring center. Now, it may not be individualized tutoring, like I mentioned earlier, and a student may need that, but there are tutoring centers that any student can go into. The library resources, a lot of places have writing centers, they're student life. So being successful on a campus and at this level really depends on how well you use the resources, right? How well connected can a student get with things that are happening on campus? So the keys to success: one, self-advocacy, right? This is something that we talk with our students about as early as possible. What does it mean? It's them understanding that they have their own voice, and that's a voice that they need to use to let people know what they need. And I just encourage every parent to start working on this. It's never too soon to start doing that. Students need to know thyself, and we know parents know them pretty good, but they need to understand what kinds of things like accommodations will make them successful. What have they used before? What's really, really worked, and how can they continue using that? Planning ahead, thinking about the financial piece, doing the research at the college. Those are really good steps. Going to visit, because we've heard it said so many times that students really, they need to find the spot that is best for them. A college or university may not be the best place, but maybe a small technical college where they're just taking courses that leads to a career, maybe that's the best spot. And sometimes we tell students, if the student wants to go to a larger university, maybe it's actually a good step to take a baby step and just take a couple courses at the local community college to get their feet wet, to start understanding what it's like to take a course, how to be successful, and then move on from there. But getting involved on campus is important, having an established support system and things like that. So these are some resources that we have available to you all that you will get a link to. Okay, Tony. You have any other questions for me?
I do. I have one, and hopefully we can make it pretty quick because I want to give Laura time to talk as well. But I said in the beginning that about 20% of our population goes on to higher education. But we know that there are a lot more that want to and don't. Yeah. And you mentioned a lot of reasons why they might not continue in college after they get there. But I think what we're seeing is that they don't even try, or I shouldn't say they don't try. I don't know if they try or not, but they don't get there. They don't start. And I'm wondering if you could maybe just point out a couple of the barriers that exist to starting.
Yeah, there's many for sure. I think one of the things that does happen is I don't think students understand early on when they're in high school, completely understand what the variations and options are for them to take that next step. They may just have ideas about maybe their brother or sister went to a college, or maybe, somebody else, but they know that may not be right for them, but they don't know what is right. So they're not familiar with, some of these other places, like in getting like technical skills. And, there's a place in Lexington called the Building Institute. And it's a place where a student can go if they have interest in mechanical work and construction. And so sometimes students they don't know about those resources, and then secondly, I think parents can be apprehensive. They don't really know what's going to happen. and they're unsure of taking those next steps, and so they don't take some of those next steps, and just trying to visit and to find out more about all these different options. And like how I mentioned about a student taking like 1 or 2 classes at a community college, some people don't realize like that is actually an option. So taking some of those small steps and trying to learn more about the resources, I think are some reasons for sure.
Yeah, those are some of the things I would have guessed as well. I mean, I know I was not aware that I'd be making more money as a plumber than I am with a PhD. So, but I think that's a message that needs to get out there, because there are really good career paths that don't require, the kind of.
Yeah. And I think sometimes parents and even some of the students, like I've been working with some younger students on some pre-eds, and some of them are already saying that they're going to go straight to work. And like one student said she's going to work at a factory because her brother works there. So, she's kind of predetermined, what she's going to do without exploring a whole lot of other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And having supportive parents that understand that you need the dignity of risk, and yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure people will have questions for you. I shouldn't say I'm sure, I hope they do. But let's move on to Laura, my neighbor at HDI. So I know you've done some really great work, Laura, in terms of supported decision making. And the more I hear about it, the more I hear you talk about it as an alternative to guardianship, it just seems like a no-brainer. Why are people still stuck thinking that guardianship is the way to go? Why isn't everybody utilizing supported decision making? So what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. So my name is Laura. I am a middle-aged white woman with medium-length brown hair, wearing glasses, and I have a blurred background. So I think this question kind of goes back to the last one that you asked, Teresa, about why people don't go to college more often. And I think part of that is the expectation and kind of the way things are done. Like at best, you might get a job after high school, but certainly college is not something that is on people's radar. Similarly, I think people expect, and it's as families, educators, other people in the field, expect a person who, especially a person who has an intellectual disability, to get a guardian when they turn 18. And that's kind of, it's one of those, this is the way we've always done it type of situation. So it's what people have done for centuries, literally. There have been guardianship laws as long as there have been laws in the world. So it's something that people are, at least they think they're familiar with it. Now, one of the things we've had to do a lot is kind of dissuade a lot of the myths around guardianship. But I think that just that expectation being this is what we do is why so many people continue to go into guardianship. Not to say that some people don't, that's not appropriate for some people, but we see it kind of as a blanket recommendation instead of an individualized recommendation.
And can you kind of summarize, like, what do I lose if I'm under guardianship? What can I not do that I would be able to do if I went the supported decision-making route?
Yeah, so you can't, as far as the legal things, you can't enter into a contract, so you couldn't sign for example, an employment contract, or maybe some of the paperwork you would need to do when you go to an institute of higher education, things like that. So there's that. One of the myths around guardianship is that the guardian is supposed to be kind of, the overseer of everything that the person does. That is a reality of the way it is practiced sometimes, but the way the law is written, that is not what is supposed to happen. But you definitely would lose the right, like I said, to enter into contracts. Some people lose their right to vote. It's not automatic in Kentucky anymore, but it's a possibility. You might not be able to get a driver's license. You might not, you wouldn't be able to get married because that's a contract as well. So there are a lot of things that you can't do. And then there are also things that institutions or other people might assume you cannot do, but might extend beyond what other people would interpret the law to actually be. So that goes back to the myth. So, but when we're talking about what people in reality can and can't do, it can be even more restrictive than the law states.
Yeah, because not everybody's walking around with a copy of the law in their back pocket to whip out when someone says.
I mean, I do, but most people probably don't.
So supportive decision making just sounds great. Can you tell us some of the principles of it?
Sure. So supported decision making is just kind of a fancier name for getting advice. So it's asking people who you trust and who you know to give you advice and help you figure out what you need to know to make a decision. So like a lot of the other stuff that we've talked about today, some of it is a natural progression of what we all do. It just needs to be a little bit more intentional for some people with disabilities. So what Andy and Stephanie were talking about earlier, that's a whole lot of supported decision making. And I'm willing to bet that, you know, even 10 years ago, they weren't calling it supported decision making, but that's what was happening. And so you saw some of the things being, you know, Andy's dad does photography, so he was able to introduce him to that. His coach, his teacher, introduced him to lacrosse. Another teacher tried to introduce, you know, the coffee shop thing, but that didn't go so well. So we've got all these different things coming at people. And so the supported decision-making team around a person would help them talk through the pros and cons of each option. The important point being that at the end of the day, it's the person's decision about what they make, what they decide to do. And so like Andy might have tried photography and decided it wasn't for him. You know, my dad was a big golfer and I golfed with him from when I was very young and I took lessons, but it's not something that I was super passionate about. I don't do a lot of it today. But he had that opportunity, you know, he gave me the opportunity to learn that, just like Andy had the opportunity to do some of these other things. And sometimes the support team is, you know, talking to the person and explaining what pros and cons might be and what all the different options are. And sometimes the support team is just making sure the person has what they need to be able to try out the things that they need to do and let them make the decision about whether or not they want to continue with it. So it can be really hard, especially if the supporters are family members, to kind of let go of that piece when they're going to make a decision that the family or the supporters might not like. But if it's not something that's going to be dangerous, you know, you got to let them try. And if you've had adolescent children in your home, you know how difficult it is to get them to just do what you want to do. So, and this can be used, it doesn't have to just be used for people who are at that transition age. It can be used with people who are much younger, so they can practice making decisions. And so they don't just have to start this right when they're 18. So they can start when they're younger, making small decisions and then gaining the confidence. Like I'm sure that Andy was able to go out on his own and get a job because he had the confidence from other successes that he's had to be able to do that. If he hadn't had the opportunity to do some of that other stuff, he probably wouldn't have done it. You know, Stephanie might have preferred he chose a different method, but at the end of the day, he got himself a job. So yeah, it's just something that has to be a little bit more intentional and considerate, and it can be really difficult, especially for families to do and to let go a little bit of that control. But at the end of the day, you can see a lot of positives from it.
Yeah, and I love how it can be so informal. I mean, when you say an advice giver, right? I don't remember how you phrased it. Maybe that was it, but I thought, man, you're that for me. You know, I mentioned that you work in the office next to me. Every day that we're there together, it's like, all right, I need help with this, you know, life situation. I'm gonna my wife's gonna leave me if someone doesn't tell me what to do. And I'm still married. So thanks, Laura.
So far, so good.
Yeah. All right. My last scripted question for anyone, and I know Stephanie will get back to you because you have some other things you want to say, and there's some other things I want to ask you. But you know, it's a Friday afternoon. It's cold, at least in my book. I don't have a real good feel about our game against the Netherlands tomorrow in the World Cup. I need something to make me happy. So can you give me a success story about someone that had their rights restored and how it helped them live more independently?
Sure. I mean, we have a bunch of them actually, but one I'll talk about was the very first person who we had in Kentucky who used supported decision making as an argument to get her rights back. And just to kind of frame this, so for people that don't know, if a person has a full legal guardian, as an adult, the only way to get rid of that is to file a petition and go back to court, and the judge has to remove that guardianship. That's the only way to get rid of it. So we were working with a young lady named Susie, and she wanted to have her rights restored. She had been in foster care as a young person and had gone straight from foster care into adult guardianship. And so she was actually using supported decision making. Just nobody was calling it that. And so she tried to go back to court to have the guardianship removed, and the case was basically thrown out. So our partner from Protection Advocacy happened to be in the courtroom that day and asked the judge to appoint Susie an attorney and let us come back and try again. And so that happened. So the attorney was great. She was able to talk to learn about Susie. And then we went back to court, and the same judge awarded Susie her full rights back. So she no longer had any form of a guardian. He saw how she used her support team to get help and was comfortable with her having her rights restored. So for the first time in her life, Susie was able to make her own decisions and didn't have to consult other people. She does, but she didn't have to. And so Susie, still that was our very first one, I think 7 years ago. She's still doing great. She works, she lives her own life. She, has these, great relationships where she gives other people advice and acts as a supporter for them. And she gained a lot of confidence from that, and she knows what it was like to be in guardianship and to have those restrictions on her, and the freedom that she's able to feel now is really rewarding to her, and she can see how far she's come. And that's a young lady who didn't have, what we would call the natural supports of a lot of family members around and things like that, because she was in the foster care system. But she does have a lot of people around her who care a lot about her and who she goes to for support. Now, sometimes she's grumpy and things don't always go perfectly for her, but that describes a lot of us. So I think the fact that her journey hasn't been perfect is a really great example. Not all the decisions she made were great. She learned from them and she grew from that. So Susie's still out there doing her thing. She doesn't like to talk about it a whole lot because that's not who she is. But every time I run into her, she's doing great, and she's happy, confident young woman.
Great. Well, thank you. And I now feel a little better about the world. So
Good.
That's awesome. So Stephanie, we can go back to you. I think you had something that you wanted to add, and I'd love it if you also shared some of the resources that you put together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, because each of the panelists who spoke after me reminded me of some of the parts of our journey and resources that we received along the way that were really helpful. I mean, and the first thing I wanted to just address is that, even though I agree that Andy is awesome, I also don't think he's uniquely awesome. I think that, he had a couple of buddies who found out about how he got his job. And these are friends who have Down syndrome. And they said, well, we'd like to work at Chick-fil-A. And they just went up and straight up applied for Chick-fil-A, and they got their jobs. So I think we learn from the examples of the people that we're around. And I think that a lot of the different suggestions that we give, a lot of people could use. And so, and we did use Voc Rehab Services once he got his job, because we kind of didn't plan on how it went. But we did have a job coach who came in and helped him to learn how to, follow all of the directions that he needed to at Publix and to learn his job. And then we had another like refresher kind of 2 years after that, where we contacted Voc Rehab again and said, hey, we could use some help again. And so just like Beth said, we did take advantage of that. I think also as far as supports that he's received in college. Andy, who helps you who do you go have meetings with every Wednesday?
With me.
Yeah, don't you go meet with Tunji every Wednesday?
Yes, I do.
And what do you guys do?
I think we're working on like homework stuff. He helped me like to get better.
Yeah, so they have a really great academic support office at his college, and he's had a note taker in class, and he's also allowed to record his class, and then he takes his notes and the recording to the academic support office every Wednesday, and they go over what his homework assignments are, and they make sure he's keeping up in class. He's also auditing his classes, so we're not doing it grade-based because, again, for us, it's more skill building. And that was part of the reason why we decided on the one college over the other, was because to do the comprehensive program at the other college was going to cost $12,000 a semester, which we didn't have. And they also would only let degree-seeking students take photography classes. So it wasn't going to meet his needs the best. And he also didn't have as many friends going there. So that's why we checked out this other college. And in order to audit the classes there, it was $2,500 a semester. And he was able to get a scholarship through an organization called Ruby's Rainbow. And that's a scholarship program specifically for students with disabilities. But there are all kinds of unique scholarships out there depending on your circumstances, right? And maybe your diagnosis, there are lots of different options. And you kind of have to think about your return on investment there, right? Like for us, becoming a photographer, you don't actually have to have a degree. That's not a requirement for that job, but he does need the skills. So that's what we prioritized. And also we were very fortunate in some circumstances where, like our church was inclusive, our community was inclusive, and there was already that infrastructure built in where we didn't have to fight for it. But I've been doing a project in school because I'm going to Georgia State, and had to ask kind of what policy could we use to improve outcomes for people for youth with disabilities in Atlanta City. And I checked into their Parks and Rec program, and only 1 out of 18 served students with disabilities, and it was not inclusive. And when I dug a little bit deeper, we found out they only serve less than 2% of the kids, 19 out of 4,000 kids that, receive special education services through the school district. So you have to also, I do think there has to be a culture where people prioritize inclusion as well. And clearly it can be very different depending on where you live. Are you okay?
I'm good. Just reach my phone.
Oh, trying to get your phone out. Okay. So I mean, and obviously there are different circumstances depending on some levels of privilege that you might have. I mean, if you live in a place where it's more socioeconomic stability, or where you're not facing other kinds of discrimination, then it makes it easier. And that's why we kind of all have to change the culture and work together to do that. So those are just kind of my last thoughts. Andy, did you have any other things you wanted to add about? Oh, I didn't share the resources. We also have our wonderful lists. Hold on, I got these in the hold up. If you go to our employment checklists by age, we have employment checklists for, from 3 to over 21, different things you can do to improve employment outcomes during transition, and kind of what are the most important, the top 10 things to do at each age. So, and this is something we produced through HDI when we did the Kentucky Works project, and would love, again, like Tony said, with the yo-yo data, would love for people to access it because it's there, it's available, and we want people to be able to benefit from it. And we have suggestions for both parents and caregivers, and also the youth themselves, what they can do to prepare for employment at different ages. All right, Andy.
Yeah.
Sure. I think life is good and things was hard. And right now I am keeping up right now. And then the helps me have to move on or keep. Right now I am doing keeping my head straight, and thing was wrong, it was fine.
Cool.
Okay, because my chest 22.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you both. So now we have the mediocre mom and the not uniquely awesome son. And I mean that as a compliment, Andy, but it helps me remember why we're doing this seminar, because if this was just a how awesome is Andy and his unique self, that would be very interesting, but there wouldn't be a lot of take-home points. And the whole point of doing this is that others can learn from your experience. And I think you've given us a lot to think about. All of the panelists have, really. So I was supposed to leave more time than I did at the end for questions, but we can take some now if I forget how we were going to do that, honestly. If Walt or Chelsea were going to kind of throw those our way.
Tony, I've got a question, and this question is from Andrew, and this question is for Laura. If the everyday reality is that the guardians sees themselves as responsible for every aspect of decision-making in the individual's life, I take it that the underlying legal principle is more along the lines of supported decision-making. Is that correct?
That is correct. And while our statute doesn't say anything specifically about supported decision-making, the principles are definitely in there. And if you look at it's KRS 387.500 is where the law for guardianship starts, and specifically 387.640 is where it starts listing the duties of the guardian. And you can see that they're in there, and part of it is protecting the civil rights of the person who is under guardianship. And it also states that the guardian is supposed to help the person gain or regain skills for employment and independence. So those things are in there in the law for sure.
Thank you.
We have a comment from Jennifer, and the comment is, this may be for Beth McDaniel. It is unfortunate that the counselors their rehabilitation counselors are penalized when the case does not have to be closed as unsuccessful.
Well, they're not, for each unsuccessful closure, they're not directly penalized. It's just that counselors are held to a standard where they do have to help X amount of consumers per calendar year, help them attain competitive integrated employment. So each unsuccessful closure is not a direct penalization in any way.
Okay. Thank you. We have a comment from Caroline, and the comment is, thank you, Stephanie and Andy, for sharing. It is inspiring to hear your journey. That was a comment. If any of our attendees have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'd be glad to take a few questions. We have a question from Stacy. And the question is, here in our county, teachers and parents don't seem to know what all is available to their children and teens after high school. I've been working with the ID population for over 30 years, and I get bombarded with calls from parents and teachers wanting information. I run an SCL company and don't have the time for everyone. It gets overwhelming. How can we get information to the families?
Can I just add, Walt, before somebody else answers? This is Carolyn
Sure.
Wheeler. Just that the link that Chelsea Bocar has been dropping into the chat box and will get sent to all of you has lots and lots of resources that folks have referenced during the webinar today, Stacy. So please do click on that link, look at those resources. And I think you'll find there are items in there that you could send directly to parents about these topics. Also, you may know how to find me because I do a lot of training for folks who provide SCL waiver services. So please feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm glad to help.
I was also, and so in addition to what Carolyn said, so we have those checklists that families can look at that are in that link, that are included in that link. And in addition to that, we have some online courses that are an online course for families about how to be more engaged in preparing for employment. And we also have one for professionals on how to engage families. So I can share the links in here. It says it goes to the host and panelists, so I don't know if somebody else has to reshare that. But I'm sharing the links to those online courses, but you can also find the checklists in the link that was provided by Chelsea. So, because it is overwhelming. And honestly, as a parent, sometimes it's, maybe you don't know all that's out there. And sometimes you're bombarded by all that's out there.
Stephanie, you should be able to share that with all the attendees at this point, I think.
So I'd like to add in just a comment for that person. So when they're talking about, let's say, a young student with intellectual disabilities, I had mentioned the 4 CTP programs that we have across the state of Kentucky, and we're hopeful that in the future there will be more. So one of the resources I didn't share, but families could go to, is a place called Think College. So just put in Think College. It's a national website, and it lists all kinds of information, videos about transitioning to college for students with intellectual disabilities. And then somewhere on that website, there's a state map. And if they went to Kentucky and clicked on Kentucky, they would see the 4 programs and a link to each one of those programs.
And that's not just Kentucky specific, right? I mean, they can look anywhere in the country.
Thank you, Teresa. And we just have dropped the Think College link into the chat. So there we go. We have time for a comment or question. If anyone would like to share.
I was going to say too, that just because your college might not be able to provide it, sometimes you can get some of those resources through Voc Rehab, or if you have a Medicaid waiver, sometimes it will cover some of the equipment that the college might not be able to cover themselves.
Thank you, Stephanie. We have a question from Jessica. Can you please clarify how a VR counselor can know what services or resources a college student might be entitled to? Earlier, I think I heard the school is not required to provide a computer. Are resources federal law governed by the state or college by college?
So a lot of times it's a collaboration with the school and what resources they may have to be able to provide as well. Any college that receives state funding or federal funding will have some type of disabilities resource center. So a lot of times it's going to be a collaboration with the resources available there, as well as what VR is able to assist that consumer with, as depending on what they need for their college as well.
Thank you. If we got time for one more comment or question, if anyone has one they would like to share. Would anyone like to share a comment or a question? Well, Jessica asks, I would like to know what keeps this amazing young man motivated. He has wonderful supports.
So that's a question for you, I think. She wants to know what keeps you motivated, like with school and with your, wanting to have a job and all that stuff.
Yeah, Jessica says, yes, it's a question for Andy.
It is good and it makes my head to get better. I am getting better because of what things is good, and I took some medicine and then I will be fine, and I had really good things like good snacks like bananas, that too, and then it's so good. And
I think you're talking about getting better from getting sick, which
No.
is good, right?
That's fine.
Oh, you're getting calls from people?
That's Mitch.
Sorry.
Mr. Paulo.
Sorry.
Sorry.
So, but what helps you stay motivated with school? Oh, no, seriously, were you talking about the snacks at lunch?
No, I was at home.
Oh,
First thing, I was checking my dog first when I am walking downstairs.
but what keeps you motivated for school?
For
And
school,
and like photography and stuff.
I did for school. I did
Like what makes you want to do it?
I can get some snacks and like cookie or all that. And my favorite is like chicken and that's it.
Okay, so he really is my son because he really likes the dining plan.
Oh,
So
I'm with you, man.
I actually think the answer is a really perceptive one, because I think so often we think of like being motivated as it's like has to be this big thing, right? But like it actually is exciting to get to go have lunch with your friends at school. It actually is exciting to get to. Do you like those Friday night things you guys have been doing? Like when Dad and I drop you off at at Reinhardt? Yeah, and now he's texting his friends, and like that's what it's about. And isn't that what it's about for most, 22-year-olds in college? It's not a lot of times they don't have that big picture sometimes in mind. It's I want to be able to be doing what my friends are doing and hanging out with my friends and eating fun things. And I think that's pretty legit.
Well said, Andy and Stephanie. Tony, where our time is about up. Would you like the final word, and then I'll take us out?
Oh, I don't know if I can top what everyone said. I mean, thank you to our excellent panelists who gave well thought answers, and the people behind the scenes too. I know we did quite a few planning sessions, and many people were engaged in putting this together, and I learned a lot. That's going to help me in my job, and I hope everybody else did too. So take us out, Walt.
Thank you, Tony. As advertised, this has been great. Thank all of you for taking time out of your day to share your experiences and expertise with us. Thank you for an informative presentation. Be well and stay safe. Thank you. Goodbye.